Well, hello again to my most favorite grandchildren in the whole wide world. This is Boompa here with another great story for you. Now today, I wanted to give you a story that was maybe a little special. So I thought I probably ought to put on one of my very special Boompa top secret magic storytelling hats to help put a really good story into my head for me to tell you. And so I brought one of my favorite superpowered storyteller hats. How do you like it? Ain't that pretty? Ain't that pretty? You like that? Look at this. That's stories pouring into my head. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness, the stories. Where do I begin? Yeah, I guess, okay. Wow, Hat, you really are superpowered magic. Okay, my top secret super duper magic storytelling hat has given me several stories to choose from, and today I'm going to share with you the story of the Pied Piper of Hamlin. This is a story you may not know, but either way, I'll tell it to you the best as I can. You see, several hundred years ago in Europe, which is across the ocean, there was a small town that had a major problem. The problem was rats. Yeah, R-A-T, rats. Rats were everywhere in the little town of Hamlin. They tried cats, and the rats were so big and so tough, so mean, that they got rid of the cats. The rats killed the cats. And the rats were just making babies everywhere, and then the babies would grow up, and there were rats everywhere. There were thousands, maybe even hundreds of thousands of rats in this little town. You couldn't open a door without seeing a rat down in the corner. You couldn't step out onto the street without seeing rats run along in the corners by the buildings and all. You couldn't go anywhere. There were rats everywhere. Sometimes you'd be walking down the street and one would drop on your shoulder just because you walked under a light or something and it was sitting up there waiting to jump on something. And you know, rats are dirty. And rats can cause disease. And rats bite. And we're talking about big rats. Well, this little town, the town leaders kept calling for a meeting. They kept trying to find a solution. Somebody had suggested the cat, but the cats didn't work because the rats killed all the cats. So one day, somebody says at the meeting, I have a suggestion. I know something that might work on all of these rats that are infesting our town. Well, everyone, why? How long have you known this? And the person says, look, I'm not sure it's true, but I've heard that there is a piper who is about 3 towns away from here who has the magical ability, when he plays his pipes, he controls things. He makes things happen, magical things. And I thought, maybe if we brought this man, somebody said, what's he called? I said, all I know is he's a piper. He blows a pipe like a flute. And said, maybe he could help us with his magic. Well, the town said, by all means, send out a horse and rider immediately. Offer him anything. And that's exactly what the person did. The person went about 3 towns over, riding as fast as he could. And when he got to the town and started asking around, where's that piper everybody's talking about? They said, oh, he's over such and such a location. So the person who had been sent by the town found the piper and said, sir, we need your help very badly. Can you in any way help us? Our town has been overrun with rats and mice. They're everywhere. We don't know what to do. We tried cats. They killed all the cats we put out because they're so big and so nasty. And the piper thought for a minute, and he said, yes, I can help you with your problem, but it's going to be very expensive. Well, the man was told to bring this piper no matter what. So the piper said, I'll go if you can pay my fee, but it's not cheap. And so the man said, look, the town sent me. I represent the town. I'm telling you now, we'll pay anything that you want. We'll pay you every dollar, every cent. If you want it in gold, you can have it. Is that okay? And the piper smiled and said, yes. So he went to his horse, and together they rode back, somewhat of a hurry, back to the town, because the town was so desperate for help. They come into town, and as they're pulling into town, the man who'd been sent on the mission began calling for all the town leaders to come quick, come quick. I have this piper. I have the piper. I have the piper. Oh my goodness. And everybody was looking out their windows and their doors, and the town's leaders were coming out and looking, and there was a man on a silky black horse with all sorts of fancy attire, all sorts of fancy medals and awards and color stripes on all of the things he had. He looked majestic. And they said, is this the man? And he said, yes, this is the man. So they said, please come with us. So they went over to the town hall, and they took the piper, and the man that went and gathered the piper also went in, and they told the piper, sir, have you been told what our problem is? He said, yes, I know what it is. I saw it when I came into town. You got rats everywhere. But yes, your man told me you have an infestation that is so bad that you can't even use cats to get rid of the mice. And he wanted to know if I could help get rid of them. Well, sir, Mr. Piper, can you help us? We are desperate. He said, sir, I can help you. I can. But it's going to cost you a fortune. I want all the gold in your treasury. And if you give me all the gold that's in your town treasury, I will remove the rats quickly and easily. They didn't take 2 minutes to talk it over when they said, you got a deal. We'll pay you everything in the town treasury. Now, this little town was a nice little town, and the treasury had built up quite a bit of gold. That gold had been building up for hundreds of years, actually, because the town was so old, the town of Hamlin. So they said, we'll pay you, we'll pay you. And with that, right on that spot, the piper got back on his horse, went to the entrance to the town. And while he was at the entrance, he looked at all the rats, and he reached into his pocket, and he pulled out a small little pipe. Looked like a little flute, something like that. And he starts blowing on it. Just little tweets, beautiful little sounds, like almost something you'd hear in a children's melody. And lo and behold, as he played, rats began coming out into the street to see him. They began pouring out from left, from right, from up and down. They were jumping from the haylofts in the barns. And the rats were all coming out, except they left a little pathway right between all the rats on this side and all the rats on that side. And here was one side of the town, and here was the other side of the town. And the piper's right here at the entrance to the town. And about that time, when there are rats so thick that they're piling on top of one another just to get into a place, he starts to walk his horse very slowly right down the middle of the street towards the end of town. The rats were all on both sides, and as he began to pass the rats, they began to close in behind him. They closed in and started following him. And the townspeople were looking from their windows and doors and going, my gosh, it's working. It's working. He has a spell over the rats. He's cast a spell. The rats are following him. And as he plays his flute with a happy little song now, his magic pipes, and walks down the town, all the rats and mice in town form a big, thick line, walking like in a parade, right behind him. By the time he gets to the end of town, from one end to the other, all the rats and every rat in that town has joined the group walking behind the Pied Piper. Well, the people knew this was some kind of magic. They'd never seen anything like this before. And so they decided it must be something of the devil. I don't know. This is too scary. Yes, but look, he's getting rid of all the rats. All the mice are going. They're following him. Well, let's just see where he goes. So the townspeople formed a little group also and began following from a distance where they could see the rats and the piper up ahead. You know, that piper walked right down to the river. And he got off of his horse, still playing, and just started walking into the water. Just playing his little flute. He walked into the water till it was waist deep. The river was flowing all around him. And as he walked into the river, the rats began to follow him into the water. They followed him into the water, and as soon as they got in the current, the water swept them away. So rats just kept coming and coming and swept away, coming and coming and swept away, swept away. All the rats, all of them drowned. All of the mice drowned. The Pied Piper had done it. He had rid the town of Hamlin from all of their rats and mice, and thus solved their problem. Now, as the townspeople started walking back to town, and the piper was getting himself brushed off, dried out a little bit before he got back on his horse and returned to town, the people started saying, you know, he did a fantastic job. It really was a miracle. I don't know. Some of them said it was witchcraft, but they didn't know. So finally, one of the group members said, you know, we've got to give him all the gold in our town, but in our treasury, everything we've got, we have to give to him. And several people started thinking, well, you know, he did a lot for us, but I just don't know. I don't know if we should give him everything we had. I mean, he did do us a favor. Maybe we'll just give him a little something. Well, do you know by the time those town people got back to the town, they had decided they weren't going to pay him. Some big cheapo started talking. I think it was the mayor, and he kept saying, you know, really, anybody that plays a flute could have done this. Well, we know that's not true. But that's what he started saying, and all the other people, because they were greedy, started saying, yeah, that's right. Anybody that plays that kind of a flute could probably have done the same thing. It's not worth giving him all of our gold. Well, about that time, the piper arrived back in town behind the townspeople, and they walked back into the town hall, and the piper got down off of his beautiful black horse and walked in, and he was very proud of himself. And he says, now, are you satisfied? Did I get rid of all the rats like you asked? Everybody, yes, sir, yes, sir. They applauded, yes, oh, you did great. And he said, now, it's your responsibility to pay me. I want all the gold in your treasury. And the mayor said, well, can we talk about this just a little bit? And the piper said, what? And he said, look, we've been talking about this on the way back. You did a great job, sir, but we're not so sure that anybody that happened to have a flute like yours couldn't have done what you did and all. And, you know, this town is a poor little town. Yes, we've got gold, but it's because we haven't spent it or squandered it. We've taken care of it. And now that we're about to give all of it away, several of the people said, that's not very wise. We need our gold. Well, it's true. Every town needs its gold. But you don't break a promise with the Pied Piper. And it soon became clear to the piper after he tried to reason with them and saying, look, I did a job. I did it fast. I did it completely. There's not a single rat or mouse in this town. They're all drowned. Give me half of the gold in your treasury, and I'll leave. Well, now, some of the townspeople were getting really greedy, and for the long story short, they decided they weren't going to give the piper anything. Nada. Zip. Null. Zero. No gold. And when the piper realized this was their final word, they will not pay, he said, very well, lowered his head, shook his head, walked back out, got onto his horse, that beautiful black stallion, and he rode out to the entrance of town, right the place he had started to draw the rats. And he picked up his pipe, and he began to play. And the soft magic of his flute, his little musical instrument, started to sound through the town. And all the town people that had been in the meeting followed him out and were standing out and watching him leave. And they were astounded when he stopped and turned around on his horse at the entrance to town and began to play his flute. And they're going, why on earth is he doing that? Why is that piper playing again? He's gotten rid of all the rats. He's supposed to be leaving. We didn't pay him. He's supposed to go. He's not going. And he started riding his horse slowly down the street as he played on his pipe. And as he played on his pipe, riding slowly down the street, all the children in the town began to look out their windows and open the doors. Most of their parents were already out in the street because they had been with the piper when he had tried to get paid, and they were the ones that telling him they're not going to pay him. And as he walked down that street, every child in that village came out of their homes and into the streets. And just as the rats had done, the children began to follow the piper right down the street. Every child that was old enough to walk and had not become an adult yet. So that goes from probably age 4 or 5 up to maybe 16 years old, 17 years old. Everyone. And the parents were trying to pull their children, and the children just kept walking like they were hypnotized, like they were asleep with their eyes open. But they were all smiling, and they were all skipping along, and they were going along behind the piper happily. And the parents kept trying to stop them, kept trying to stop their children, and the children would not stop. And finally somebody said, leave them alone. We'll just watch where he takes them, and then we'll get them. So they stood a little distance behind. The townspeople stood behind the crowd and watched their children follow that black horse with the piper piping as they went down the road, down to the river. And they started to think, oh no, he's going to drown our children. No, I don't think he'd do that. I just don't think he'd do that. So they really didn't know what he was going to do. And just as he got close to the river, he changed the melody, and this time he went across the river, and every child followed him behind on foot. If a child was too small to walk across the river, an older child would pick him up and carry him. And he carried him across the river. And when they got to the other side, there was a big, beautiful, grass-covered mountain. And as the piper played and the children crossed the river, almost magically, the parents are going, where is he taking them? And he said, I don't know, but we need to get across this river. And about that time, the mountain began to open up. The mountain that they were headed to began to open up. It just began to create a magic opening as he played his pipes. And when you looked inside, you could see sunshine and rainbows. You could see all kinds of flowers. It was a beautiful place. It was like a playland. It had Ferris wheels and all kinds of fun things to ride and things for a child to do, and sweet smells like candies and like cookies and warm breads were all coming out of that mountain when it opened up. And the parents were standing there with their mouths hanging open. What is this? And while they're standing there amazed, almost too shocked, too stunned to move, all the children follow the piper into that mountain. And one of the townspeople goes, let's go, we've got to get our children, we've got to get across this river, get our children. And as soon as they touched the water, the piper had gone inside, all the children had gone into that magic land, and the big mountain began to close. Look what's happening, the mountain's beginning to close, the mountain's closing, we got to get there, save our children. Well, the mountain closed completely. Those people in the town of Hamlin lost their children to a magical fairyland because they were so greedy that they wouldn't pay the Pied Piper what he had justifiably, what he had fairly earned. He had every right to what they had agreed to pay him, and they wouldn't pay him, and it cost them dearly. Now that's the story of the Pied Piper, and that's why the complete title of this story is The Pied Piper of Hamlin, because it was the only town that never paid him. And when he disappeared into the mountain with all the children, no one ever saw the piper, the children, or that beautiful black stallion ever again. Now that's the end of this story. I hope you like it. I don't know if you would say that's a happy ending or a sad ending. I think the kids were probably happy, but I don't think the parents were happy because their lying and their greed cost them their children. Well, that's it for today. I'd like to say a special thanks to my magic storytelling hat. I know it's unusual, but I told you it's got some good stories in it, and I think the Pied Piper is one of those stories. So who knows, I may wear this magic hat again to get some more ideas for stories, or I may try another one of my many magical storyteller hats. So be sure and come back and visit me now here at Boompaw's Clubhouse. Remember this, Boompaw loves you very, very much, every one of you. And BB loves you too. We love you with all of our hearts. So until we see you again, this is Boompaw saying bye-bye. Bye-bye for now.